So Juneteenth, aka Freedom Day, Jubilee Day, and Emancipation Day, is an annual holiday that commemorates the end of slavery in the United States. But did you know that a small village outside of the US has also celebrated that holiday for over 150 years? In northern Mexico, in the state of Coahuila, resides a community whose history stretches back to the era of slavery in the United States. Called the Mascogos, they can trace their roots back to Black Seminoles who escaped the brutality of the antebellum South. In fact, their town is called Nacimiento de los Negros, meaning birth of the blacks, and was once home to thousands who escaped slavery. You see, Black Seminoles are descendants of the Seminoles, a Native American group that settled in Florida in the 18th century, and enslaved folks who had escaped from plantations in North Carolina and Georgia to Florida in the 1700s. At the time, Florida was under Spanish rule, and because it offered asylum to enslaved people who were willing to convert to Catholicism, an underground railroad running south cropped up and it became a haven for many Black people looking to escape slavery. But don't think for one second that it was out of the goodness of the Spanish crown's heart. It was all done in the name of saving as many souls as possible for the Catholic Church and destabilizing the plantation economy of British colonies, but I digress. Spain eventually ceded Florida to the US in 1821, and as such, many escaped slaves were either recaptured, sold, returned to their previous places of enslavement, or killed. Then President Andrew Jackson also signed into law the forced removal of native tribes, and after a brutal war and a horrible ethnic cleansing that we now know as the Trail of Tears, nearly 4,000 Seminoles and 800 Black Seminoles were forcibly relocated to Indian Territory, present-day Oklahoma. Faced with continuous hardship and the constant threat of re-enslavement, more than 5,000 people made up of members of the Black Seminoles and other Native American tribes escaped to freedom in Mexico in 1849, where slavery had been largely abolished 20 years prior. In fact, historians estimate that as many as 10,000 enslaved people fled to Mexico through a southern underground railroad. The Black Seminoles, though, settled in a tiny village in the desert of Coahuila, named it Nacimiento de los Negros, and formed the community that would come to be known as the Mascogos. But let's fast forward a few years to 1866, 3 years after the Emancipation Proclamation officially ended the enslavement of Black people, and a year after news of liberation arrived in Galveston, Texas. Freed Black people in Texas started organizing Jubilee Day as a way to commemorate June 19th, and because many Black Seminoles traveled back and forth between Nacimiento and Texas, they also started celebrating Juneteenth as a way to show solidarity with their brethren. Which brings us to today. Today, the Mascogos still celebrate Juneteenth, or Dia de los Negros, with a parade of horseback riders, live music, traditional Afro-Seminole and Mexican dishes, and even hand-clapped hymnals such as Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. In fact, one woman, Lucia Vasquez Valdez, still knew the English language hymns that her ancestors brought from the US. Over time, however, droughts and limited opportunities made it so many Black people in the community went back to the United States. Many also married into other local families and as such moved to other parts of Mexico or stayed and unfortunately lost a bit of their historical cultural traditions. But through it all, the Mascogos remain very aware of their roots and they take pride in them. And the fact still remains that in a small village at the base of the Sierra Madre Range, Juneteenth is an honored annual holiday.